Hello, everyone. Welcome to United States History since 1945. My name is Philip W. Travis. I did my doctorate at Washington State University. My specialization is in the U.S. and the world, particularly in the 20th century and most specifically the Cold War era. So much of the period of time that we're going to be dealing with in this class. I've authored a number of articles as well as a book that relate to the United States during the late Cold War. My first book was titled Reagan's War on Terrorism in Nicaragua, the Outlaw State, which examined U.S. interventionism in Central America during the 1970s and 1980s. I've also authored a number of articles and chapters in edited volumes, and I've also been featured on a number of podcasts and radio programs related to this subject. So really excited about this course, and I think you will also find this to be a fascinating course, and I think a really intriguing learning experience. So before I talk a little bit about the map you see here, and we kind of start to get into the subject matter of this course, let me just give us an overview of what to expect in this class. So of course this is an online course, and the way this course works, each week I open up a new weekly module. So the whole course does not populate all at once. I open the class week by week, and I think this is good to keep us sort of on task on a week-to-week basis. Now, if you were traveling or something for some reason, you were not going to have access to internet for a period of time, though that hopefully doesn't happen. But if you request, I can provide you information about upcoming assignments. But the class opens week by week. Every week, on the weekend, you'll see the new week populate. Every week there's a video announcement like this. In the video announcement, I will often provide either a factoid or I will ask you to summarize the contents of the video. You will see the video. It will have an extra credit discussion forum associated with it. All you do is watch the video and summarize the video or the factoid in there, and you earn bonus points. The bonus points get added to a test score, but they're not added until the end of the term. So if you're doing these, you won't see an effect in your grade until the very end of the term. The reason I do that is I want students to sort of be engaging in the subject matter early in the week, understand what we're doing, and so I think that's the best sort of process to learn and understand this material. So video announcements every week. And the idea with the extra credit is I want you to watch and make that post before the end of the day on Thursday to ensure that we're getting started early. I provide video lectures every week as well. And the video lectures, sometimes there are quizzes on the video lectures. Regardless, though, the video lectures are subject matter, that is certainly game for our tests. So make sure you're watching the video lectures as well. I try to keep them at a reasonable length, but please do your best to watch those. And when you watch them, take notes on them, just like you would be sitting in a class. Take notes on them. We have one assigned textbook, that's the Chaffee book. But in addition to that, there's a number of supplemental readings that you will find in modules as the term progresses. So follow the class week by week. Modules is really the place to go, okay? Take care of everything in the Getting Started module, and then the week 1 module will open and begin working on the material. There are quizzes in the class. Your quizzes amount for a total of 10% of your grade. There's 2 tests, a midterm and a final. Together, those are 20% each. There is an essay, and the essay is total worth 40%. It's a research paper, and you'll find more information on this when you look at the syllabus, and I'll have further information on this forthcoming in the class. But for the paper, you write a paper proposal. And in the paper proposal, I want to see a list of preliminary academic sources. I want to see a thesis. And I want to see a 2-paragraph introduction. And we'll talk more about that as we get closer to this. The paper proposal is due week 6. Your midterm is due week 5. The final paper is due during finals week. And the final test is due at the end of week 10. So you have a collection of quizzes, reading quizzes, video lecture quizzes, and so forth, worth 10% of your grade. You have 2 tests, the midterm and the final. These are worth 20% each, 40% together. The paper is worth 40%. 10% for the proposal, 30% for the paper, and then the last 10% comes from our graded discussion forums that are assigned weekly, though we sometimes don't have them during exam weeks because of the amount of stuff going on. But don't hold me to that. Generally speaking, we have them every week. Sometimes I might abbreviate them. If we have a lot going on, I might make the requirements only like one post or something. Typical requirements for the discussion forum are 1 post and 2 replies starting by Thursday and occurring over 2 separate days. So if you posted on Wednesday and replied on Thursday, that would be fine. If you posted on Thursday and replied on Saturday, that would be fine. If you posted on Monday and replied on Sunday, that would be fine, as long as you have 2 days of activity and it starts at least by Thursday. Then you'll be sure to fulfill the basic requirements. Of course, in the discussion forums, I want to see you engaging assigned materials, lectures, readings, and I want to see substantial interaction. So, make sure a one-line, "Hey, great work," kind of reply to a classmate doesn't count, so you won't receive any credit for that kind of a reply. Okay, so remember, modules is the place. Follow modules weekly. That is where you want to go for everything. So don't just look in your dashboard on Canvas and see, oh, this is due, oh, this is due. Go to modules. Don't just look at the due dates that pop up in your Canvas. Go to the Canvas class and go to modules. That's where you're going to see everything. Okay, all right. So let me just talk really quick, and this will be our first extra credit for this week. Just summarize sort of what I'm going to explain here. So, of course, our class, U.S. History since 1945, there's a lot of big subjects that we're going to be looking at. And this week, what we're first going to get into is start thinking about the origins of the Cold War. And, of course, what you're looking at here is a map that breaks down NATO and the Warsaw Pact at the height of the Cold War. The NATO countries in blue. NATO stands for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. I'm sure most of you are aware of this. Now that we've, in the 21st century, that conversation with respect to the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the expansion of NATO has become one of the more commonplace sort of elements of commentary in the United States today. So you're probably aware of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. This was created in 1949. And it was created kind of part of a larger redevelopment of the United States' national security apparatus and those of its allies. So the United States created NATO. It maintained a very large defense budget. The Defense Department was created. There was no Defense Department before the Cold War. There was a Secretary of War. There was no Secretary of Defense. The Joint Chiefs of Staff was created. The National Security Council, which advises the president on national security matters, was created. So these are huge developments for the United States and its engagement in the world at this time. And NATO was created as an alliance apparatus between the United States and its allies, largely to contain the spread of communism, particularly Soviet-influenced communism. In the aftermath of the Second World War, there was this really significant fear that if the United States did not remain proactive in addressing a potentially aggressive military power in the world, that it could face a calamity much like that of World War II. Because, of course, in the lead up to World War II, perhaps some of you are aware of the Munich Conference of 1938, where the British and French appeased Hitler over German annexation of this area right in here, the Sudetenland of what was at the time Czechoslovakia. Today it's part of the Czech Republic. But it was also the United States at the time was isolationist. It wasn't engaged in world affairs. And so for Western powers, the big lesson of World War II is do not appease and do not refuse to engage with respect to a potentially aggressive military power. And so that was really the lesson, because World War II, the United States was isolationist. It had no military preparedness or desire to do anything about Nazi Germany. And the French and the British were relatively prepared militarily, but had no will to actually be proactive in preventing the development of an aggressive military offensive launched by the fascist authoritarian state of Nazi Germany. So the fear with the development of the Cold War was that maybe the Soviet Union represented this too. And so this led the United States to form NATO with its allies to create collective defense against what it saw as the potential expansion of the Soviet Union. And of course, here you see the Soviet Union with its allies, called the Warsaw Pact, which was created in response to NATO, including places like occupied Poland, East Germany, Romania, Hungary, so on. And the numbers you see, now this is an early 80s map, but the numbers that you see are actually estimates of troop strengths, how many soldiers are in these areas. And of course, the little blue speck right here, this is Berlin, which of course becomes like a microcosm of the Cold War. Berlin was this divided city, East Berlin and West Berlin. West Berlin being a free Western city, and of course connected by rail lines from the West. East Berlin, part of East Germany. And of course it's there, obviously, that the leadership of Nikita Khrushchev would build the Berlin Wall at the beginning of the 1960s, completed during the presidency of John F. Kennedy. This period of time, when we think about the United States, now you think about domestically, of course, we're going to talk about the profound developments in the United States domestically as well, from women's rights to civil rights to environmental activism, fundamental changes to the growth of suburban America, of technological advancement in the country, the building of the interstate highway system. This is a profound period of time for the United States. So domestically, we're going to examine this a lot. We're going to examine concepts like the sexual revolution. We'll look at authors like Beth Bailey in one of our supplemental readings. We're going to look at the Vietnam War in this class. We're going to look at anti-war protests. We're going to look at the development of the women's movement, second wave feminism, as historians call it, in the 60s and 70s. We're going to look at the civil rights movement, profoundly significant development during this period of time as well. Among many other things, the growth in mass consumer culture as well. There's many topics we're going to look at. The first one we're going to start to think about, though, is the origin of the Cold War. And we're going to think a lot about how the Cold War shapes American society. The Cold War resulted in some really profound changes in the United States. And it's important to note that when World War II ended, there was not this consensus in the United States, in U.S. politics. There wasn't a consensus that the United States was going to become this globally engaged military power. There was not a consensus about that. In fact, most thought the war would be over, the various armies would leave, there would be efforts to rebuild Western Europe, and things would go back more or less the way they were. No one thought that the United States would start maintaining bases in these places and feel a need to leave troops. This did not seem immediately apparent in the summer of 1945, following the defeat of Nazi Germany and then, of course, ultimately the defeat of Japan. However, the competition, the ideological divides, the economic divides between the United States and Soviet communism would ultimately necessitate an increased involvement of the United States in the world. And this, of course, occurs most significantly under the leadership of Harry Truman, who, of course, would promote and sign his Truman Doctrine, which we'll be talking about, which sent aid to Greece, and Turkey, who were pressured by potentially Soviet-aligned movements. And then, of course, the Marshall Plan, named for George C. Marshall, Secretary of State, who was also Secretary of Defense, and George C. Marshall. The Marshall Plan was this aid package designed to basically support the rebuilding and the economic recovery of American allies throughout the world, not just Western Europe. And these developments helped to lead to a solidification of the Cold War. Now, this is basically the factoid, and then I'll be quiet because we're going to read about all this stuff, and we're going to talk about this in the discussion forum. You're going to hear about this stuff in the recorded lectures as well. so I'll cut this short here now. But this is the gist of the factoid. This is what I want us to understand here. The Cold War is unique. It is not simply there were these major powers that were competing. The Cold War is unique because it was an era in history in which the world witnessed effectively what historians called global bipolarity, meaning that the world was largely divided between the competing and uncollaborating forces of the United States, democratic capitalism, its allies, and the Soviet Union, authoritarian communism, and its allies. And the two did not behave in a normal fashion. There was not free movement of people. They were not economically engaged. They weren't even engaged diplomatically in the early phase of the Cold War in any meaningful sense. So the world was in a very literal sense divided. It was an era of global bipolarity. And that is really what makes the Cold War unique. Now, really quick, before I let us go here, because I know this is getting long, I'll make this a 2-point bonus for this week, okay? But what makes this really unique for the United States are the profound changes that come as a result of this. Never before in the United States' history had it maintained a large sort of wartime preparedness during peacetime. The United States will see unprecedentedly large military budgets, defense budgets. This had never been the case before. The United States historically maintained a very small army, a navy, and a contingent of Marines. It did not maintain a military during peacetime that was prepared to go to action to fight the Cold War in any area of the world. This was a huge, huge change, this sort of development of global sort of national security interests in the defense industries. This results in the emergence of what we call the military-industrial complex. And we're going to talk about this. But this has a profound influence over American society, economics, and politics. Very profound development. It's during the Cold War where the United States effectively ends the constitutional process of the congressional power to declare war. Now, Congress has authorized wars, but since World War II, it has not declared any wars. Wars are instead fought under resolutions, like the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, which we, of course, will be examining as it relates to the Vietnam War quite significantly. So there are some truly profound developments for the United States, and the effects on society are groundbreaking in many ways. And we're going to talk about much of this and so much more in this class. I hope everyone really will enjoy this class. I'm sorry this got long. Most of these will not be this long. But please go into the extra credit discussion board and kind of summarize this last portion, okay? Some of the uniqueness of the Cold War, some of the changes that are witnessed as a result of the Cold War, and so on. And let's have a great term. Please let me know if you have any questions. I'll see you in the discussion forum. Send me an email if you have any questions. Let's have a great term, everyone.